Yeah, welcome everybody. And my name's Stuart Hettich. For those who don't know me, I'm the president of the Melbourne Electronics and Radio Club, hiding in the caravan in Seymour. And tonight's guest speaker is our gentleman with QRM Guru, and led by Chris Chapman. So, and Paul. I'm sorry, Paul, I don't recall your surname, so my apologies there, sir. But anyway, so as you've probably been aware, Chris and the team have been doing quite an extensive bit of work on suppressing QRM around the shack and coming up with viable solutions for amateurs to try and evade or avoid noise. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Chris and let him take the show. So good evening, Chris.
Terrific, thanks, Stu, and good evening, everyone. As Stuart said, my name's Chris Chapman, VK3QB, the Treasurer of the Radio Amateur Society of Australia. And with me this evening, I have Glenn Dunstan, VK4DU, our President, and Paul, VK2APA, our Secretary. So really good to have those gents join us as well this evening. It looks like we're a fairly small group, so I'm happy to take questions as we go. If you want to ask a question, just raise your hand, or I'm just having a look at what's happened to my screen here. Just raise your hand or click on the little hand button and we can answer questions as we go. Otherwise, we'll take them at the end. All right, what I'll do is I'll share my screen. I'll try not to get too bogged down in PowerPoints. Just a little bit of background about who we are and what we're doing. And after we've gone over the QRM Guru resource, just a little bit about some of the other initiatives we've got underway. So quite happy to take questions about those as well. All right, now sharing my screen with everyone. I need to be able to share my screen, whoever is in charge. I can't share my screen. Neil?
Neil, can you I'll set it up so Paul can share his screen, so Chris can share his screen? Hello, let's see if we can. Just bear with us for a sec, Chris.
That's right.
You there, Neil?
He's on mute, Stewie.
You're on mute, Neil.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I've allowed sharing, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything.
It does now.
Does now?
It does now. Right. Thank you.
All right, can you see my PowerPoint screen?
Yes.
Certainly can. You might want to maximise it because I can see the whole desktop.
There we go. Everyone can see that whole screen?
Yep.
Thanks, Chris.
Great. Away we go. All right, we've already covered the intros. Glenn and myself and Paul from RASA, and also it's great to see Michael here from the Gippsland Gate Radio and Electronics Club. G'day, Michael. Right, just very, very quickly, a little bit about us. Formed in 2018. We're an incorporated society and registered with ASIC. We keep our costs very low. We're an internet-based association and really do everything in the cloud. We don't have any real estate. We don't have any hard costs. We have a good, strong relationship with the Australian Communications and Management Authority and also with AMC, and we communicate with both those bodies on quite a regular basis. I suppose one of the, or a couple of the things we wanted to do when we established an alternative national association was look at some new and innovative ways of thinking about the hobby and how we represent the hobby and the things that are important to help us grow the hobby and address some of the challenges we face. And of course, that also involves challenging some old ineffective methods. So I'm hoping some of that will come through in what we're going to go through this evening. And as I said, we're quite happy to take any questions. So just raise your hand or press the little hand button. Hopefully I will see it okay. And look, one of the other things I think that's important is to illustrate that effective representation needn't cost a lot of money. Our annual fees are $10 a year. Very quickly, for those of you that perhaps haven't heard of RASA or what we've been doing in the last couple of years, we've had 2 AGMs and we've returned a surplus each year. Our operating budget is around about $3,000 a year. We communicate with the VK community very regularly and openly by way of our magazines, our bulletins. Last year, before the lockdowns, we visited about 15 clubs and 4 or 5 hamfests. And we're regularly publishing articles to raise awareness levels about regulations and the role of ACMA. When was it? So March of 2019, we released QRM Guru, which is really the keystone topic of this evening. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And maybe about a month ago, we released another online resource called vkregs.info, which is really an online resource giving us the LCD in plain language, if you like. We'll have a quick look at that. Hopefully most of you have seen our QTC electronic magazine. Amateur Radio Tech Support, another online resource, a knowledge base made up of articles covering about 4 or 5 key technical areas for people starting out in the hobby, as well as an online support portal. Quite some months ago now, I think at the beginning of this year, we released the Welcome to Amateur Radio guidebook. And whilst it's been delayed, last year we convened a subcommittee to look at 2x1 contest call signs, which are very popular around the world, and they were approved by the ACMA 4th quarter of last year, but unfortunately there's been delays in getting them implemented this year. We can look at that briefly a little later as well. So it's been a fairly, and of course we were lobbying to get digital modes for the foundation licensees. So a fairly busy couple of years, and hopefully you can see there's a few runs on the board. Our priorities for this year and next year, we want to continue to keep the pathway of communications open, and we endeavour to get to clubs as often as we can. And of course, all of us in VK3 are very well aware of the challenges that have come with that in the last 7 or 8 months. I think we've managed half a dozen Zoom conferences, which have been great. Most important, of course, seek feedback. So please, if you have feedback, if you have ideas, if you have concerns, send through an email or tell us about them. Of course, it's very important to maintain education and awareness on VK regulations and what's going on with ACMA. We want to continue to promote and support QRM Guru, and I'll talk about that a little bit shortly. A big one for this year is access to the 60-metre band, and we'll come to that a bit later. 1 kilowatt for advanced licensees, and of course to continue to help and support newcomers to our hobby. You may have seen just recently we have deployed a reverse beacon network here in VK3, and that's with thanks to a financial grant from the CW Preservation Society here in Australia as well. And we're looking at further rollouts for Whisper in 2021, particularly looking at 6 metres. Right, I'll get straight into radio frequency interference. As Stuart mentioned at the outset, and probably anyone that lives anywhere near suburbia is very well aware of the very high levels of QRM that we all face these days, particularly on HF. And one of the things that we found when we started to look at this, and it was regular feedback we got when we were out talking to clubs and obviously looking at Facebook commentary and feedback from members and the community in general was that QRM has really become a major issue, especially for those of us in suburbia. I'm sure, like you, I hear stories all too often of people almost walking away from the hobby due to the frustration associated with high levels of QRM. And there really is, to this point, there's been little or no support to help us in dealing with that. There hasn't been much in the way of representation, and there's been even less in the area of help. Of course, there are a number of books out there, and you can go to YouTube and various internet sites and you can find loads and loads of material. But the one thing we found when we went out looking both at the internet and around the world at other organisations was there was nothing that brought it together and really helped in terms of an integrated process, methodologies, lessons learned, and tools to help us help ourselves in effect. The other thing that I'm sure you're all very well aware of, and we got this feedback both from amateurs and also from ACMA, was that the regulator is not going to step in to proactively help you resolve your noise issues. It's a whole new world with all of the imported electrical equipment, and I'm sure we're all very well aware of all of the noise that's generated by these switch mode power supplies, garage door openers, LED lights, all the machinery around the house with electronics incorporated into it. And unfortunately, the horse is bolted. It's in the country, it's going to come into the country, it'll keep coming into the country. So, you know, what can we do about it? We listened to a whole bunch of people and we went out and spoke to people and we had a look at what we could find on the internet. And we decided late 2018, early 2019, the best thing to do was to obviously leverage off the internet and create a platform that we could all contribute to help each other. And really that's what QRM Guru is all about. We've created a knowledge-based platform where we put processes, we put methods, we put tools, but we also put lessons learned from fellow amateurs, not only here in Australia, but all around the world. So it really is a dedicated knowledge base to help all of us help ourselves. We released it March 2019 at Perth Tech, and since then it really has exceeded our expectations and has got some terrific feedback and a lot of take-up. It's something you really need to spend time looking at yourself. I'll just take you through the basics of it now for a few minutes. Let me switch over to here. Right. QRM.guru. A couple of nods or hands up. Everyone can see that screen okay still? Everyone can see my web browser? Yep, terrific, good. All right, it's a very, very simple presentation layout. It's structured on a knowledge-based template. We've provided a number of article categories. Firstly,
we can only see your PowerPoint screen. We can't see your website. You probably need to reshare.
Yeah. Meeting controls. Stop share. Thank you. Where's it gone? Right. How's that?
Good.
Better?
That's
Yeah,
better.
yep.
Thanks for that. Sorry about that. All right. QRM.guru is the URL. Wherever you are in the tool, you can click the logo and it brings you back to the home page. It's structured around article categories here on the left-hand side. Every single article belongs to a category. We've got a number of categories, an overview of the process, announcements, regulations, case studies. We haven't done much on automotive installations yet. Talk a little bit about the QRM Guru Lab, our kill kits, and then we go through each of the steps of the process with the supporting articles. Over here on the right-hand side, we have a QRM Guru Facebook page. So you can pop off and like that and get updates as to just really notifications, some interesting links from time to time. The trending section are the more popular articles, things that people are looking at the most, and the latest articles that we publish. So if you pop back to QRM Guru from time to time, that'll just give you a bit of a sense of the most popular articles and the newest articles. As I mentioned, I'm not going to go into everything here because there are now dozens and dozens of pages. We'll just look at some of them to give you a little bit of a sense of what the resource is all about. First place to start, newcomers start here. So a little bit of a description, a little bit of an overview. And one of the big things that came out of everybody we spoke to who had gone through the journey of resolving their QRM was the need to exercise a methodology and some discipline. One of the fellows we spoke to in VK2 took 18 months to resolve his power line noise. He told us in retrospect, had he followed a process, it would have taken about 4 to 5 months. So the process is, of course, to identify the noise, keep a journal of the noise, keep all the evidence associated with your observations, so that when you go, in this case, to the power companies and the regulator, you've got a good solid story to tell. Equally so when going to ACMA. So one of the big things was to start a journal and log your local observations. And we've created a number of templates to help you process, to help you profile and track your noise. The other thing that we thought might be useful for those of us that are more driven by process flow diagrams was, of course, a process flow diagram. So it just lays out a nice pragmatic step-by-step process to the sort of activities that you want to consider doing as you work through the process of identifying and resolving your local QRM. And the other thing that's a foundation of QRM Guru are the videos. The bulk of these have been created by Ian, VK3BUF, who's one of the main collaborators here. And Ian has put together a whole bunch of videos to walk you through each of the major steps or each of the major activities that you might do when identifying or resolving noise. There's a number of other videos there on building the DF loop. We might have a look at one of these just ever so briefly. Right, I'm not going to, as I say, I don't want to spend all the time looking at videos. That's something that I'd invite you to do later on or over a beer at some stage. But as you can see, there's 13 or there's 12 videos there covering a whole bunch of topics in relation to QRM and the methodology. The other thing I just wanted to go over briefly are the case studies. And there's a lot of benefit with these case studies because they are real world problems that our fellow hams have contributed. So we've got examples such as the noise cancelling kits that some of you may have seen. MFJ make one, the MFJ 1026. And there's also a VK5 who produces a kit that's very good. And Phil VK3QB recently put one of these together and did a very good case study on it. So if you've got some localized noise that is frequency specific, these kits can be very good at helping to resolve that noise. There's the MFJ 1026. I just want to find one here. Here's one from Andrew VK3FS. That's a very bad noise he had on 2 meters. And he's walked through the equipment, the methodology, how he resolved it, and he found it, DFing it. He submitted all his paperwork to ACMA, and within 2 weeks an inspector came out and the noise went away. So the big message from Andrew was, if you follow a well-documented methodology, if you keep evidence, you keep your forms, you keep diaries, recordings of the noise, it makes ACMA's job much easier, and they're much more likely to come out and help you resolve it. I'm not going to go through any more case studies, but I just want to give you a sense that they're there. Right, something else that came out of all of this was the need to think about some of the tools that I might want to use. And when we started going to the clubs, there was a lot of questions around things, particularly around suppression and ferrites. And one of the interesting write-ups that Ian did, and this is where the knowledge base comes in. I can type in ferrite and it will immediately bring me up a list of all the articles that contain that search word, with the most popular at the top. So this is an article Ian wrote, The Truth About Ferrites. And if you haven't really thought about or used ferrites much, it's a very, very insightful article. And Ian has applied some really good thinking and his home lab to illustrating what you can achieve using ferrites to help suppress noise. And one of the particularly interesting outcomes from this was, you see there, winding a wire a number of times through a snap-on increases the suppression quite remarkably. One of the other very interesting findings, and you'll see some chatter about this on the internet, is the difference between type 43 and type 31 ferrite material. Ian measured it in the HF range, and you can see the biggest suppression, or the largest difference in suppression between a type 31 and a type 43 is at about 3 megahertz. So if most of your noise is 7 megahertz and higher, more often than not, type 43s will be adequate. So well worthwhile having a look at that article, and Ian has also created a video on that one. Right, I don't want to spend too much more. I'm wary of the time. I want to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. As that example showed, you can sort of type in solar panels, and it'll bring you up a list of all of the articles associated with solar panels. So you can go and have a look if you're getting noise to do with solar. We were fortunate to be able to reprint 2 articles, one from ARRL and one from RSGB. So you'll find both those articles there as well. But the search engine is very, very powerful. So I could have noise cancelling. It'll bring up everything to do with noise cancelling. So have a play around with the search engine. It's very, very powerful. Then we go through each of the steps in the process. Basic diagnosis, locating the noise source, of course, noise reduction in your shack, clean up your own backyard first, as Stuart said, and then techniques for resolving your noise. A big one for a lot of people, power line noise, dealing with neighbours. And again, one of the common bits of feedback we get is how important it is to have good relationships with your neighbours, or whoever might be creating the noise for that matter. So if you have noise with a neighbour, maybe have a barbecue, invite them over for a beer, help them clean up a tree that's fallen down, and they'll perhaps be more receptive to helping you if they're causing noise. We've got a fair bit of material on solar panels and inverters, but I'm afraid at the end of the day, the best way to resolve solar panel noise is when you choose the solar panels and the inverter to begin with. And there's a fair bit of material there. And I think it was Max sent us a letter that he used with the solar panel providers to get that little bit more information to ensure that the installation was noise free. So definitely worthwhile having a look there if you or your neighbours are considering solar panels. Fair bit here on the templates and forms that we suggest you use. As I said at the beginning, the more information you can collect, the better your evidence, the more likely you are to get a good outcome. One of the bits of feedback we've had from 3 ACMA RIs is that when amateurs come to them and they've followed this process, they are far more likely to get a good reception from ACMA. And in fact, it seems that the number of complaints are dropping and the complaints that go through are being addressed because of this process. It used to be, and we'd see Facebook posts and we'd get anecdotal evidence suggesting people were phoning ACMA simply saying, my neighbour's LED lights are causing S9 noise on 40 metres, come over and help me. And of course, that's just not going to work. But if you've got a really good journal, if you've DF'd it, if you can narrow it down, ACMA are going to be far more likely to support you. Right, so that sort of takes us through the basics of QRM Guru. As I mentioned, it's now, well, it's coming up to 2 years since it was rolled out, and we've really been really happy with the feedback, but perhaps more importantly, the participation from so many amateurs, both here in VK and also from other countries. We've started an email support service, and we've probably helped about, it's probably about 32 amateurs now, either with fairly simple problems or in some cases some quite complex problems. But we always encourage everyone to go through the process first, collect your data, and if or when you hit a roadblock, feel very welcome to reach out to us. So that's what QRM Guru is all about. Please go and have a look at it. And if you've got noise, have a look at the process. Start to keep a journal. Start to identify your noise. And then if you need any help, please reach out. I might just take a little bit of a break and see if there's any questions.
Just one thing I might mention, Chris, while you're on mentioning solar panels, if you may.
Sure. Sorry, who's that?
Stuart, it's sorry, bit of background noise, mate.
Go ahead.
My video's off as well. I better turn that back on. Be polite. I'm just getting rid of the crappy background. Just you're talking about solar inverters. I've got a 5.5 kilowatt or 6 kilowatt system at home where the inverter is made by ABB, otherwise known as Aurora, and it is absolutely and utterly silent as far as RF noise goes. A mate of mine put a similar system in at almost exactly the same time, and I believe his inverter is called a Sunny Boy inverter, which is, mine was made in Italy, his was made in China just by chance, and his is atrocious. The amount of noise it produces is very, very measurable, where mine is almost immeasurable by comparison. So just,
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah,
that's all.
I've got Fronius, and it's very, very quiet. We're a little bit loath to recommend particular products for obvious reasons. All we can do is report what people tell us.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of, yeah, it was just purely, I wouldn't go out and just, on my recommendation, and buy an ABB inverter, but just by chance, the comparison between the two is quite distinct.
Yeah. And look, have a look, but if you're considering solar, have a look at the section, and there are some templates there to help you through that process. Are there any other questions on QRM Guru? But I think one of the things I want to try to emphasize here is we are not experts in resolving QRM. What we've tried to do is provide a platform and share expertise and experience and lessons learned from the amateur radio community. We've wrapped a process around it. And yes, Michael has a DF loop there. I wasn't going to touch on the products, but one of the things that came out of it was the difficulty in acquiring ferrite products at reasonable prices. So we've been able to pull together some kits, and you'll see them there on the website. There's a club kit that we donate when we get out and about. And then there are two kits. One is a kit made up of, in fact, I'll just switch back to here and we'll talk about that briefly.
Just on, while you're doing that, Chris, what's is there you're finding a common thread with what you're hearing around the place? What's the biggest or the most common thing that you find amongst amateurs as far as their main bitches, their main complaints?
It is a mixed bag. For some people, if, for example, power line noise is a big issue for them, it will be overwhelming everything else. And probably it's fair to say, Stu, one of the things that's coming out of this, if you've got an S7 noise level and you're not quite sure what it is, and you go and start profiling it, you might find it's made up of lots and lots of 5%ers and one 20%er. And if you get rid of the 20%er first, your noise level might drop down to, say, an S5, and that might have been power line noise. And then the next one might be your own LED lights or some switch mode power supply. Probably the biggest thing for most people in suburbia is the general high density of these switch mode power supplies that are connected to just about everything we have in our houses. In most cases, when it is causing an absolute big problem, people are able to resolve it because it's that one big 50%er and it stands out. A VK5 had a terrible problem late last year, early this year, I can't remember. It was about 400 metres away, and a neighbour had just put in a bank of 64 LED lights he bought off eBay. And it was a fairly easy one to resolve because, of course, it came on every night around about dusk, and it went off at about 11 p.m. So it was profiling it was quite easy, DFing it was quite easy, and it probably took him about 4 or 5 weeks. You'll find it in one of the case studies, VK5 SFA, Steve. I think off the top of my head, it took him about 4 or 5 weeks, and he ended up paying, if I remember, he paid to replace half the lights, and the neighbour paid the other half. So I think he was about $400 out of pocket. But look, it's a cheap way of resolving the noise.
This is an interesting thing about is a lot of these components that are brought into country. Australia does an absolute, for want of a word, piss poor job of regulating or certifying compliance with any form of an industry standard. I don't even know whether we actually have one in Australia, but the classic example is I have an NVR, a network video recorder at home that runs my cameras. I've got security cameras in the house and all around the perimeter and that. Having a close look at the power supply in it, the original artwork on the screen printing shows the presence of 2 large filter capacitors in the switch mode power supply. When they've actually built it, they've decided to save money and they're just not actually installed them.
Yeah.
How many of these devices have been submitted for a compliance test and then the actual final product is non-compliant?
Yeah.
And sort of, to me, that's, you know, one thing that I think that we do in Australia, our authorities do a relatively useless job of policing, if there's any.
It's probably a fair call, and it's reflected when you go and buy all the equipment at Bunnings or any of the other stores. And yes, it is quite interesting. Ian's pulled apart a few of these switch mode power supplies and wall warts and made the same observation. There's the place on the mini PCB for the filtering, and it's simply not there. There was a fellow on Facebook the other day, a 48-volt power supply for his pool filter, causing all sorts of noise. Yep, security cameras. These switch mode power supplies are the bane, they really are. So once again, go and have a look. A combination of filtering, suppression, and chucking them in the bin and going and buying a quality product. A combination of those 3 approaches seems to resolve the vast majority of these types of noise sources.
The sad part with this, sorry, the sad part with this one of mine was that the device is actually a rather expensive industry grade product. So I won't mention names, but it's not the cheapie you buy on eBay with half a dozen cameras thrown in. This is an industrial grade, high quality security product. So even those products can fall well short of what they're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. And look, we hear these stories time and time again. And I think from memory, there's something on QRM Guru about this. If you feel strongly enough and you feel you've got sufficient conviction, you can go to ACCC. It's been sold and it's not fit for purpose. But of course, you're taking on, you know, potentially a fairly large importer and a government regulator who perhaps doesn't feel the same way about it as you do. And these are the challenges we face. And this is why I think a lot of the feedback we're getting, both from ACMA and from other sources, is that it's a technical hobby. We need, in the first instance, to take ownership for the problems and attempt to resolve them ourselves. If we can't, ACMA, more often than not, will step in and help us. But I think the key message here is you can't just expect the regulators to come in and when you ring up and say, I've got some noise and I know it's not at my house.
Just one question about that. With the ACCC, rather than going there, is it reasonable to use your consumer rights and head over to the stop you bought it from and say, hey, as long as you didn't import it yourself, of course,
yeah,
this isn't up to snuff, doesn't meet the requirements, give me my money back or swap it out.
Well, that
And
of course,
document it, because if everyone collects those, then sooner or later you can go to the ACCC and say, here's a list of all the times that people have done this.
Yep, absolutely, Neil. And look, it's the same thing with, I think Mirabella brought in a bunch of stuff a couple of years back, and it was really, really bad, and they lost the deal with Bunnings as a result. I seem to remember reading that somewhere.
Although that can also be the fact that the third party who's making it goes, oh, I can save a few extra cents if I do this. And what they originally approved and got through in the first place may not be what they're getting now.
That's right. Yeah. But look, if we had more resources, we'd love to be able to invite people to send in their experiences in more detail and we could log them. And as you say, if we found that a particular product from a particular retailer was really non-compliant and there were 500 amateurs sending in the findings, you know, collectively we might be able to do something on behalf of the community. But at least as a midway point, at least we're providing a framework, if you like.
Okay, so there isn't a place on QRM Guru where I can say, fill out a form and it just logs in an Excel spreadsheet saying I've had this product on this date.
I'd love to do it, but we just don't have the resources or the time.
Okay.
And of course, the other problem we've got is we need some supporting evidence. But, you know, these are all things that, you know, we might be able to look at in the future.
Okay, fair enough. It's great, still a great site.
Thank you. And look, you know, feedback is what's going to continue to drive it. So I think that's particularly important. Right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Not from the beginning. Where was I up to? Right. Like that.
Yeah, from current slide up in the top.
You're seeing it, I can't see it.
Top left, just near next to from the beginning.
Oh, thanks. Right. All right, so we've covered off that. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but Ian has created a laboratory at his home office and done a fair bit of analysis on a number of products. And you can have a look at those on QRM Guru. He's looked at about, oh, I don't know, half a dozen, 8 common LED lights and various other products and profiled them over the emitter bands. And one of the things we've observed is probably in the last 12 months, LED lights are becoming far less of a problem. Certainly not like the early days where pretty much all of those products were a bloody nightmare for us on HF. All right, the truth about ferrites, as I sort of said, please go and have a read of Ian's article. It's interesting, and he's also done a video, and it really does provide a good insight into how useful these little chunks of ferrite can be to help you in suppressing noise. You just can't get enough of them around the shack. I've got them on all the leads coming into and out of my gear, and I've noticed just a general drop in the noise floor. And on transmit, some of the little bit of interference I was getting into the headphones and things like that has gone away. One of the other things that's come out of this, and where it makes a great club project, is it's a fantastic educational process, because you're going through the process of actually doing something to help one of the members get a better amateur radio station and get more out of the hobby, but you're applying so many elements of the technical part of the hobby, from analysis, identification, identifying noise, filtering, suppression, improving feed lines, getting antennas higher in the air, and all the myriad of solutions that we'll apply to reduce noise floors. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we found was people sort of said, well, can you help us with some of these tools you're talking about? So Ian's put together a very, very basic DF loop antenna kit. And if you wish, you can either just take the design from the website, go buy the stuff and build it yourself, or you can buy the kit. Most people have come back to us and said, you know, at the end of the day, it's just easier to buy the kit. We've got what we call a QRM kill kit, which is a mixture of ferrite cores and snap-ons. And of course, most important, share your experiences with us, because every bit of feedback we get at the end of the day finds its way into one of our articles. We've got 3 kits, what we call the club kit, which is really just a bit of everything. It's a good starters kit, and we generally donate those when we get out and do these presentations in person. They're also available if you want to buy them. There's the DF loop kit I've already mentioned, and a simple kit of ferrite cores and snap-ons. And for a lot of your QRM problems, those, what have we got there? 5, 10, those 12 ferrites will probably help you. All right, so look, that finishes up the section on QRM and what we've been doing for the last 18 months there. I just wanted to take 10 minutes, if I could, to take you through some of the other things we've been working on recently. VK regulations. Anyone that's tried to read the LCD, probably their eyes gloss over very, very quickly. It's a long way out of date, and it's certainly not written in language that most of us could digest. So we got together with Ron, I'm sure most of you know Ron from the Radio and Electronics School, and put together the LCD in plain speak. So look, it's a website, vkregs.info. Once again, invite you to have a look at it, and it covers off all the basic elements of the LCD, the regulations, operating procedures, the subsets within each of those, the phonetics, the Q codes, a little bit about our electromagnetic radiation obligations. Whilst the band plans aren't required for licensing or examinations, they're good to know, and you can download it as a handbook. So that's there to have a look at. I won't take any time heading over there. You can have a look at that in your own time. Beginning of this year, we released something called the Welcome to Amateur Radio Guidebook. Again, we found that there was a bit of a gap, particularly for foundation licensees, after they got their license and came home and sort of said, okay, what's next? How do I get on air? What do I do next? So it's about 35 odd pages, and those are the topics it covers. Once again, I'm not going to go through all of that, but hopefully you can see just looking at that table of contents that we're covering all those sorts of things that someone might want to be thinking about as they're setting up their first station, and thinking about the sort of things that are going to get them going in the hobby. That's also a free resource. You can download it from the website. Following on from both the guidebook and also QRM Guru, those of you that frequent Facebook probably see a lot of the conduct that goes on there. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. We felt that more of a safe environment for newcomers to be able to ask questions was warranted. So we've set up another online resource called the Amateur Radio Tech Support Service, or ARTS. And it covers, once again, all of those basic topics that you need to get started in the hobby. So setting up your station and some good housekeeping, getting it right from day one. The basics on antennas, the basics on feed lines, obviously QRM, band plans, getting on the air, and regulations. So a little bit like QRM Guru, there's some knowledge base articles there, and you can have a look at those. But it takes it a step further. And if you want to ask questions, you can ask questions via those of you from the IT world would be familiar with ticketing systems. So we're using Freshdesk, and you can ask questions via a ticketing system. And there's 4 or 5 of us who sit behind ARTS, and just really enter into a two-way email conversation with people looking for a little bit more support. So that's what ARTS is all about. And I'm hoping by now, we've published QTC, 3 editions. The November-December edition is due out in the next couple of weeks, so look for that. One of the things we wanted to do there again was put out a true e-magazine. It's published both on a magazine format and also PDF, for those of you that prefer PDF. But the great thing with the magazine format is we can integrate videos and of course hot links and all that sort of stuff. So please, if you haven't seen QTC Mag, head over and have a look at that one. Right, that's a little bit about the resources and what we've been doing for the hobby. On to just a few things on regulations and operations. This is old news now, but 2018 and 19, we collaborated with the WIA to update the band plans for 160, 40 and 30, particularly with the popularity of digital modes, and the big one being FT8. For those of you that play with FT8 and the digital modes, you're probably aware that quite often there's interference to and from SSB in particular. So those 3 bands in particular needed a little bit of fine tuning so that we could get some better harmonisation. We've been getting a bit of feedback lately, particularly from JS8 operators, that some SSB ops are spilling over onto the JS8 frequency, which is in the digital band plan. So please, if you're using SSB above the digital segment on 40, keep your dial frequency to 7084, and that provides just a little bit of headroom for the JS8 operators. And look, we've got loads of space on 40 metres. And if you're on 40 during the day, consider going above 7.2. We've got 100 kilohertz up there. And of course, thanks to the WIA, we've got a quick reference guide. You can download that from the website. That prints off nicely on an A4 sheet of paper, and you can laminate it. Right, something that, and again, this was feedback we got from the contesting community early on. Why can't we have 2x1 contest call signs like so many other countries? So in early 2019, we convened a cross-sector committee from memory of either 5 or 6 very well-known contesters from right across the country. Not necessarily a member of any organisation, but there were members of the WIA, RASA, BK Contest Club, and various other well-known contesting organisations. And we went through the process of looking at how 2x1 contest call signs would be best implemented here in Australia. Probably took 4 or 5 months. A lot of thought went into it, a lot of research went into it. And finally, we submitted a recommendation to ACMA late in 2019. That was accepted by ACMA. So it's now included in the call sign template, and you'll see that if you look on the AMC call sign template form. But it's been delayed. Obviously, a combination of 2 events have delayed it. Number one was obviously COVID, with all of the impacts on business there. But probably the larger impact was the broader changes to the call sign template for foundation licensees. And the fact that AMC was really overwhelmed with demand. So that the 2x1 implementation has been delayed, and we're hoping that we'll see applications open, if not late this year, very early in 2021. The other good news is that the template won't just be VK1 Alpha. We've got 2 additional prefixes, Victor Juliet and Victor Lima. So that means there will be 3 times 24, 72, if my maths is correct, 2x1 call signs per call area. So watch out for that. Some of this is getting a bit old now, but the ACMA consultation paper, that's gone in. ACMA have delayed their responses to a couple of the items, but as we all know now, the FLs have access to all the digital modes. They can build their own equipment, and also the call sign template changes. What else do I want to touch on here? Right, ACMA this year, we're going to redraft the LCD and also look at 60 metres. It's been delayed on 2 occasions, so we're now looking at 4th quarter, which we're obviously very much towards the back end of. So we're regularly reaching out to ACMA for updates on that. And on to 5 megs or 60 metres. You can have a look at our proposal on our website in detail. I won't go through it here, other than to say ACMA have advised us they'll be making the decision on 60 metres in December. So stand by on that one. Important to note, we are a secondary service, so we cannot cause QRM to primary, and we don't get any protection if the commercial users cause us QRM, which is one of the reasons we've gone for a channelized proposal, to make sure that we're very, very clear that if we are causing any QRM, it'll be easy to identify us, and we're not spreading out and using the band willy-nilly. When we get to questions, if there's anything in detail on 5 megs, please ask and Glenn can answer. Right. Gone about 15 minutes longer than I wanted to, so thanks for that. In summary, wrapping up, you can find all about us at the vkradioamateurs.org website and our various other resources. You can access all of them from our home website. And if you want to get on our bulletin list, send us an email. If you'd like to join up, it's just $10 a year. So on that, I'll close the presentation and invite questions.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll throw it open to the floor. Guys, questions? Deathly silence.
No? No other comments or things you'd like to see us doing in 2021?
Well, from my perspective, go on, kick it off.
Yeah, it sounded quite interesting, the VK Reg site. I'll have to go and check that out. But you started off with the LCD. Do you see that going in any other directions to cover other bits and pieces about the Act or things to do with ACMA?
Glenn?
Unmute. Evening, everybody. I'm Glenn 4DU, the president of RASA. Well, ACMA have told us that the LCD is up for review fourth quarter. As Chris said, this is slipping sideways, and December is very close, and the silly season is almost upon us. So I'd be very surprised, although you never know, I'd be very surprised if we see a review come out. It might be next year. ACMA, I mean, there's all kinds of rumours. ACMA haven't been specific with us. They've told us that they're looking to try and ease, in their words, the regulatory burden on amateurs. There was rumours flying about that amateur radio would be class licensed, but I can't see that, because they make about $750,000 out of us per annum. And if they class licensed it, it would be free. So I can't see that happening. So sorry, Neil, to answer your question, yes, I think they're proposing quite a few changes. And I don't think a lot of the changes will be acceptable. It'd be too much, I think. ACMA will try and move out of regulation if they can, because they see amateur radio as an embuggerance, quite frankly. The amount of work that they have to put in is out of proportion to the revenue, which will be their attitude. So hope that answers your question.
No, that follows the general trend. They don't seem to have very many engineers working for them anymore.
I don't know where they hide them, mate.
Just one question on the 6 metre proposal.
60.
Sorry, 60 metre proposal. From looking at other sites around the world, other places like the ARRL's band plan for it, etc. It seems is it pretty much exclusively for digital modes, or is there a voice component in that spectrum?
There's a voice component, Stuart. It's not very wide. It's only 15 kilohertz, and so I'm only guessing at the moment, but I think ACMA will move towards a channelized arrangement, which is the way it's done overseas. So there are 3 channels effectively in the bit that the amateurs would use. And we've also proposed a little digital segment of 2 kilohertz, which is enough for FTA and some CW as well. So it would be very different to the way we normally operate on HF, because it would be if ACMA go ahead the way that it has been done in other countries, it would be channelized. So there'd be 3 channels, and you would have to stay on those channels in upper sideband. So, which is the way it's done everywhere else in the world, in the UK and the US.
Okay, thank you.
Just to further on from Stuart's question, are there any proposals that include other digital modes rather than the FT8? Because obviously there's some other things you could run.
Of course, no. Oh, sorry, when I said FT8, there's 2 kilohertz proposed for digital modes, quote unquote. So they can be whatever you like.
All right.
Nobody else with questions out there across the floor? I'm amazed, guys.
I'm surprised Mike hasn't asked something about finding the QRM.
Well, I have no question really, because I think we all suffer somehow from QRM. But I have a quick comment for you, Glenn VK3QB. I like your T-shirt. Sorry, that's not a little bit off topic, but all good.
Nephew of the greatest ever.
Mm.
Yeah, so we had our last speaker was VK5 SFA, Steve Adler, and basically with what he's talking about, using mag loops and for ways of getting around noise. The two pieces of information from that talk and tonight's talk, I think, complement each other fairly well, which is good. So, I was thrown out there once more for questions. To me, it's a bit unfortunate. I was expecting that. I thought everybody else had as much noise at home as I have, so I'm sort of a bit miffed. So, guys, any more questions, please? Deathly silence.
Well, look, all the details are up there on the website, so please feel very, very welcome to email us, whether it's generally about representation for the hobby or any of those other resources that we've got there, or specifically in relation to QRM Guru. Other than that, thanks very much for inviting us along. And if you have any questions at any stage, send us an email.
And again, thank you, Chris, and everybody else, and for joining us tonight, and really appreciate the effort you've made. And the hardest thing in these times, particularly during this COVID era, is to try and keep clubs active and alive, and the use of Zoom, where, as you can probably guess, rank amateurs at using it, but we are getting there. But things like this are definitely a plus for our club, and we thank you very much for your time and effort tonight. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you very much. Thank you to RASA and the rest of the team. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And with,
Can I just
with
throw
that,
a Henry
Thank you
one
very
in?
much.
A curling
go.
one? Yeah, I was just going to ask you, you said you work fairly closely with AMC. How do you find the relationship with AMC, and what do you think of their efforts so far? That's taking the lid firmly off the can of worms.
You're on mute, Glenn.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Firstly, a disclosure, I'm an advisor to AMC, so I have to be careful what I say, and I can't be seen to publicly unnecessarily criticise the organisation. But having said that, the service delivery is not good. The backlog is too big. It needs to be reduced, definitely. We saw that ACMA pushed out a bulletin about bullying and abuse, which is completely unnecessary and really reflects badly on the hobby, very badly. We understand people are frustrated about this, but when it's all said and done, it's a cool sign for a hobby. So if you don't get it for 2 months, well, that's bad, but it's no basis to abuse the staff at AMC who work very hard. There's only 2 ladies processing at the moment, and they're overwhelmed. The biggest the biggest driver for the extra workload is people changing their call sign, and good luck to them. They're entitled to do that. So it's created a huge backlog of work for AMC. They're working to try and fix it, but the service delivery needs to be improved.
Is that primarily a issue with the service delivery, or the way that the mechanics for doing it, or just the volume of people pushing applications through?
Both, Neil, both. There's just, I think as of today, there was a backlog of about 200. I talk to them all the time because they talk to me about call sign issues, so I advise them on that. And there's a big backlog. There's only 2 people. It's fairly hydraulic, the system, and it has to be submitted into ACMA because AMC make recommendations. They recommend the call sign be issued. They have no legal power to issue a call sign. They can only recommend, and then it goes into ACMA, and you've got delays there as well. So it's unfortunate.
And when
I can
we
understand.
see a 6-week delay or a 5-week delay or even a 2-week delay, it could be that it's getting through the AMC part reasonably fast but slow, and ACMA are taking their time as well.
Well, that's the other issue too. Yeah. I had a teleconference with ACMA about a week ago, and they brought this issue of their staff being abused as well. And I mean, amateur radio has a very poor reputation at ACMA, let me tell you, and this doesn't help it at all. So we understand that people are frustrated, but like all things in life, abusing some poor customer service person on the phone really doesn't do anything. Makes it worse.
Well, that's a sad thing, because the contacts I've had, occasions I've had need to talk to the ACMA myself, have been absolutely marvellous. The service and the quality of the engagement by the ACMA, whether it's with a customer service person or on one particular occasion it was one of their engineering staff I spoke to, was nothing short of superb, considering the fact that, you know, it's a hobby, right?
A lot of other stuff, yeah.
Just one thing I would like to sort of bring up. Well, it's me being a dinosaur again, and sadly, the abolition or the devolvement of state-based call signs. I don't know. I personally think it is probably one of the biggest mistakes they've made, full stop. For the reason being is that I've had many overseas contacts where they've, as soon as they hear a VK3, they say, oh, you're from Victoria. And whether they're in Europe, whether they're in the US, they're in New Zealand, in Japan, you know, anywhere else, they know VK3 is Victoria, they know VK4 is Queensland, and VK6 is Western Australia. You know, and why the hell are we throwing away something which is, to me, a very positive thing in the structure of our call signs? I know it's something nobody here can answer, but it's just basically my bitch. That's about to me, the only thing the ACMA has done very poorly lately. That's what I think.
Yeah, thanks. You're preaching to the choir, mate, here, because RASA's position is that we support the state-based numeric equaling your location. You know, if you're a VK4 like me, you're in Queensland. VK3, you're in Victoria.
Yep.
We've raised our objection to ACMA. We actually ran a survey when this first came out about 8 months ago, and the overwhelming response was no, don't change it. We quite often go to field days. I'm a member of 2 or 3 radio clubs in Brisbane. We go and talk to people, and everybody, without exception, says what you just said, Stuart. It's a stupid idea. It never should have been done. And so RASA's position is that we don't support it. And we've gone to ACMA a couple of times at very senior levels, asking them to review the policy because it's inconsistent. Under the current ACMA arrangements, when you initially get a call sign, your number has to match your QTH because that's in the template, the call sign template with AMC, which is part of the contract with AMC. So AMC are obliged to make sure that your number matches your location. But if you move location, if you move QTH to another state, you don't have to change your call sign, which is illogical and bad application of policy, because if ACMA don't care that your numeric matches your location when you move, why should they care when it's first issued? What's the difference?
Yeah.
So it's inconsistent application of policy. We've told ACMA we don't agree formally in writing, and also at a teleconference I had with the general manager the other day, and they've gone away to think about it, as they do. So.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the survey. I remember responding to that in exactly the way you said. There's also just a simple OHS argument. If I get a pan or a Mayday call and it's distorted and you get half the call sign out, at least there's a good chance you're going to know where they're coming from.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, so across all the other sectors ACM may administer, the number matches the location. So are we going to change 3LO to 2LO? You know, that 3LO's opposite number in Sydney 2BL, is that going to be 3BL? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, they don't use the numbers anymore, but it's
No,
still...
they don't. No. But they're still, that's
They don't
official call sign.
They don't use them on the air, but they actually use them internally within
Yes,
their own
yes.
administration.
So if you look them up in the ACMA database, they're still registered as that call sign. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, look, Glenn, Chris, and sorry, Paul. Thank you very much, guys. And what have I done here? Sorry, I've just bumped something. That's right, fixed. Basically, thank you very much for being part of our club tonight, and thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's been, to me at least, very informative, and an opportunity to learn a bit more. And thank you for the effort that you guys have been putting in individually and collectively, because I'm like probably a lot of members out there, I'm also a member of the WIA as well, and I don't see the two organisations as being competitors. I believe any representation that supports amateur radio is something that should be supported. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it's a hobby that runs the risk of being overridden by commercial interests. You know, we know how much the spectrum is actually worth. If government decided to play hardball and chop it up, basically without good representation, we really don't stand a snowball's chance in hell. So thank you very much for your time, and appreciate the effort tonight. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.